Thursday, February 4th, 2016. It's lunchtime in Waco, Texas, a quiet community located halfway between Dallas and Austin.
It's a city dubbed the heart of Texas.
It's been a community experiencing quite a bit of growth in the last 10 or 15 years. It's a community on the rise, but very close-knit one.
However, one close-knit Waco family has spent their day in a panic. At 12:30 p.m., Latasha Kenton arrives at the home of her 29-year-old niece, Nikki Walker.
Well, I just got here.
No one has seen or heard from Nikki in the last few days.
Nikki hadn't called to check on her two kids, who were staying at her grandmother's for the week, while Nikki worked late shifts at her new job.
She was really a devoted mother, close to her children, and she would make phone calls to them when she was on break from work. She didn't make her typical routine phone calls, which raised red flags to the family.
Her family was growing increasingly concerned, so her aunt decided to check the home.
Okay, well, I'm gonna try to get inside. Well, her car is here, so that's a good sign.
She saw Nikki's car parked in the front yard.
I'll keep you posted. All right.
And when Latasha approaches the vehicle, she notices her niece inside.
Nikki!
Inside the car, Nikki is in the front seat, but she is unconscious and unresponsive.
Latasha makes a desperate call to 911. But when police arrive, it's clear there's no saving Latasha's niece.
As soon as they touch her body, they realize, unfortunately, they're too late.
No pulse.
Oh, Nikki!
She is cold to the touch, and rigor mortis has already set in.
Nikki Walker is dead.
Unikia Walker, also known as Nikki, carried a radiant energy with her wherever she went.
Nikki had a very infectious personality where you couldn't help but to smile being around her.
She was bubbly and fun-loving and eager to enjoy new experiences. Nikki had 2 children that she adored.
As a single mom with 2 little mouths to feed, Nikki was no stranger to hard work.
Hey, girl. Yeah, I can cover for you. Let me just make sure my grandma can watch the kids, okay?
For a while, she worked as a customer service representative for a Texas utility company.
But she wasn't satisfied with where she was in life, so she wanted to work even harder to provide a better life for herself and for her children.
And that's what led her to decide to go back to school and further her career. She enrolled in Texas State Technical College.
Nikki's goal was to get a job in security technologies, and before long, she'd do just that.
She started a position at a well-known aerospace and defense company.
She had built a really good life for herself.
And in the spring of 2015, she'd find a partner to share it with.
Hey, you need some help?
That's okay. I got it. Thank you.
Yeah, let me help you out here.
36-year-old Marcus Scott lived in Nikki's neighborhood, just a couple streets away.
Marcus was the strong, silent type.
Nikki was drawn in by his sweet and gentle demeanor.
Thank you. It's been a long day.
Oh, yeah, no problem. I live right down the street if you ever need anything.
Good to know.
Between work, school, and being a single mom, Nikki didn't get out very much. So dating someone who lived in her neighborhood seemed like a perfect scenario.
It seemed like a match made in heaven. Before long, they were inseparable, hanging out all the time. The kids liked spending time with him as much as she did.
Nikki wanted a man who would stay by her side and help her raise her children.
Nikki really saw a future with this individual and thought they could be together.
So how did she end up dead in the driveway of her own home?
Judging by the fact that her body was cold to the touch and rigor mortis had already set in, police can tell Nikki has already been dead as long as 48 hours.
But what happened to her?
Her body didn't have any visible signs of trauma, no gunshot wounds, no stabs, no abrasions, none of those things were seen.
This was one of those cases that was an eyebrow raiser from the start. So from Jump Street, we're talking about a bit of a mystery as to how she got to where she got and what had happened to her leading to her death.
Police began to speculate that maybe Nikki passed away from some type of medical issue or possibly even a drug overdose.
However, on the exterior of Nikki's vehicle, investigators locate a telling clue that suggests otherwise.
Detectives, come take a look at this.
Someone has carved the word in the paint.
That is someone who has thought about this. They know what they're going to do.
At 29 years old, Nikki Walker had already built a great life for herself in Waco, Texas.
With 2 healthy children, a good job, and a good man by her side, she had everything that she ever wanted.
But now Nikki has been found dead inside her car. And based on the initial evidence, it looks like she was murdered.
Detectives, come check this out.
On the exterior of the vehicle, someone has carved the word in the paint.
Clearly, someone with a motivation or animosity toward Nikki had damaged her car.
And a closer look at Nikki's body reveals additional signs of foul play.
Once detectives check her eyes, they see burst blood vessels, telltale signs of strangulation.
Strangulation is an incredibly intimate act.
It requires a killer to stare into their victim's eyes for several minutes while they choke them.
Someone has to be extremely motivated to actually strangle a person to death. Whoever committed this crime had personal reasons to do so.
Inside the vehicle, investigators notice another clue.
And that's the blood stain on the passenger seat of the vehicle.
There aren't any injuries on Nikki that would produce a blood stain, so investigators believed that the blood that they found belonged to Nikki's killer.
Crime scene technicians take photographs. They swab the vehicle inside and out, and specifically, the blood stain was swabbed.
They don't locate any other blood evidence inside the home.
Meanwhile, Nikki's family is becoming more and more desperate for answers.
Many of the victims' loved ones have already received the news and are showing up at the scene.
Her family was actually in the process of filing a missing persons report right before her aunt discovered the body.
So sorry for your loss, but please know we're going to do everything we can to bring Nikki's killer to justice.
Thank you. Nikki's relatives are just devastated from the news that Nikki has been murdered.
None of her family could believe that someone as kind and caring as Nikki could have been harmed in such a way.
You know, she didn't deserve this.
Because the way the murder was committed was so personal, the police asked Nikki's family if she had been involved in any type of dating relationships.
Romantic partners are almost always the place to start in any type of homicide investigation.
She was seeing a guy from the neighborhood named Marcus.
According to Nikki's family, they had only been together for about 6 weeks.
However, detectives still know that Marcus is someone they need to talk to right away.
We'll be sure to keep you updated.
So after leaving the crime scene, detectives head straight to Marcus's house.
When detectives approach the front door, they can smell food cooking and hear a TV playing inside the home.
Marcus Scott?
It's obvious someone is inside the house, but when they knock on the door, no one answers.
Marcus, it's the police. We need to talk to you. They make several attempts to get Marcus's attention, but he never comes to the door.
To the investigators, this is a huge red flag that Marcus may be hiding something. Why would an innocent person refuse to answer the door?
Waco homicide detectives investigating the murder of Nikki Walker are attempting to speak with her boyfriend, Marcus Scott.
Hello, anybody home?
They can hear the TV playing, but he refuses to answer the door.
They can't help but wonder if he is avoiding them because he has some type of involvement in this crime.
Without a warrant, the only thing detectives can do is instruct officers to continue patrolling the area and wait for Marcus to emerge.
We're headed back to headquarters. Let us know if you make any contact.
And later that evening, investigators are in luck.
At about 9:30 p.m., the patrol officer notices Marcus standing outside with another man.
Marcus Scott? Yes, officer.
The officer approaches Marcus and informs him that detectives are looking to speak with him about Nikki's death.
Detectives came by to talk to you earlier this morning. You didn't answer the door. Why not?
Oh, that was you guys? My bad. I was a little preoccupied.
Marcus told them that he heard knocks earlier that day, but he was in the bathroom and he couldn't answer the door. By the time he came out, he said they were gone.
Marcus says he was devastated to learn about Nikki's untimely death.
We weren't together for long, but man, I really cared about her.
Marcus appears to be cooperative.
He said he wants to speak to the detectives to clear his name.
Okay, well, you can come back with me to the station. Who's your friend here?
That's just my boy, Leland.
Leland?
Yeah.
Leland Marsh?
The officer recognized the name Leland Marsh.
ID.
Leland has a warrant out for his arrest for a burglary charge.
He was just one of those guys that couldn't seem to stay out of trouble with the law.
Guess what, Leland? You get to ride with me, too. Turn around, put your hands behind your back.
What? Man.
Back at police headquarters, the detectives investigating Nikki's murder sit down with Marcus Scott.
Tell us about your relationship with Nikki Walker.
Well, I met her about a month ago.
He proceeds to tell detectives that they had an on-again, off-again relationship, but they maintained a friends with benefit type relationship.
Did you kill Nikki Walker?
No, absolutely not.
Do you know who did?
No, I wish I did, but no.
He wasn't able to provide any other leads.
Detectives are still suspicious of Marcus, but they'll need more than just a hunch to solve this case.
Not only was Marcus Nikki's last romantic partner, but it also appears that Marcus was avoiding the detectives.
There was some investigating to be done, but they were believing that Marcus had something to do with it.
All right. Thank you for your time, Marcus.
No problem.
And the next morning, detectives learn there's an inmate at the county jail with some promising information for them.
Homicide. Oh, he does. Interesting. Yeah, we'll be right down. Gotta go.
The informant is none other than Marcus's friend, Leland Marsh. Leland admits it's been difficult for him to come forward.
This is one of my childhood friends. When I was homeless, his mother took me in. You know what I'm saying?
You really were close.
But when Leland heard about what happened to Nikki, he started to get an uneasy feeling.
There were some things that were not adding up about Marcus's actions in the hours before Nikki was killed.
Investigators believe that Nikki was killed sometime between Tuesday night and Wednesday morning.
It had to be Tuesday night. I dropped Marcus off at a house like maybe 1 in the morning.
But Leland tells police that when he dropped Marcus off, Nikki was not at her home.
Don't let anybody hear, man.
It's okay, I'll wait.
She used to get off work at, I think, 12:45. And Marcus would be like, well, drop me off over here. And I'm like, Marcus, bro, what, you just gonna be sitting outside till she come?
Right.
And he's like, yeah, she'll be in here in a minute.
Leland says that he offered to drop Marcus off at a later time when Nikki was home, but Marcus refused.
Hey, you sure?
Yeah, man, I'm good. I'll see you later.
All right, peace.
I remember I talked to him the next day, which was
Wednesday.
I talked to him, I'm like, bro, what happened with Lil Mom? You stayed over there last night? He's like, nah, she never came home, so I walked to the house.
So she never came home?
Yeah, he's like, she never came home.
And on Thursday, Leland says he found out the terrible news.
When I passed by the house, I'm like, damn, they had yellow tape out, and I'm like, man, I hope I didn't have to. So I got out and I talked to this old lady, and I'm like, man, what happened?
Is Nikki okay?
She's like, my niece is dead.
While he was still at the scene, Leland immediately called Marcus.
I called Marcus, and he answered the phone. I'm like, bro, that girl dead, bro. Nikki dead, bro. You know, somebody killed her, bro.
But to Leland's surprise, Marcus didn't react the way he thought he would.
But Marcus was not showing no emotion.
Yeah, man. I mean, it is what it is, you know?
Marcus was like, we just broke up.
I understand that you just broke up. This is someone you this relationship with.
Every day.
You're going to have some kind of reaction.
Something about that didn't sit right. Even though they were no longer a couple, something as horrific as a homicide should at least warrant some type of reaction.
Leland admits that even when Marcus and Nikki were together, their relationship was rocky.
Based on the arguments that he heard when they were together, Nikki felt like Marcus was smothering her.
Marcus, this is just becoming too much. I need space.
She had started meeting new people, going out to clubs. She was like, Marcus, you know, you want me to be around you 24/7. I got my own life, I want to have fun. I'm 29. Let me have some fun.
According to Leland, Marcus could not bear to give Nikki the space that she needed.
What, you trying to sleep around or something?
Marcus thought that she was messing with another dude.
Is there another man?
Another.
He was not okay with that. That was the tipping point.
Waco detectives investigating the death of single mother Nikki Walker are speaking with Leland Marsh, a friend of Nikki's ex, Marcus Scott. According to Leland, Marcus was exhibiting suspicious behavior in the days before Nikki's body was discovered.
For investigators, what Leland is saying raises even more red flags around Marcus.
It had to be Tuesday night. I dropped Marcus off at a house like maybe 1 in the morning.
Detectives can now place him at the scene of the crime within the time frame that Nikki was killed.
Additionally, Leland claims that days prior to her death, Nikki told Marcus she needed some space, and he didn't take it well.
Is there another man?
Another.
She was establishing that this wasn't working and that she was ending things. He was not okay with that. That was the tipping point.
Marcus is not all the way right in the mind. If you know him from like when I know him to now, that's not the same person.
Do you know what happened to him?
And he went to prison.
In the early 2000s, Marcus spent 7 years in prison for weapon charges and organized crimes.
He came out of prison, he's just not the same person.
What's changed?
Everything. I don't know how to explain it. He sit down, then he'll jump up, turn around in a circle, and sit back down. Or he'll get out the car, just stand there and look down the street. I don't know if his mind is gone, you know.
After speaking with Leland, detectives are convinced that Marcus was involved in Nikki's murder.
Why didn't he mention getting dropped off at Nikki's house on Tuesday night?
The aggression, the attachment style, those are all very alarming.
And later that afternoon, Nikki's cousin, Floyd Jordan, comes forward with even more damning information about Marcus.
That man was no good for her.
Floyd tells the police that Marcus was abusing Nikki.
She didn't break up with him for nothing. He's dangerous.
Floyd tells the detectives that the reason Nikki and Marcus's relationship ended was because of Marcus's violent tendencies.
Tell me! Nikki came to the realization that not only was it dangerous for her to be around Marcus, but it was dangerous for her kids as well. She didn't want them to be around that.
But Floyd says Marcus refused to take no for an answer.
He was stalking her and showing up to her house unannounced.
He would show up there. He would wait for her in the dark, wait for her at midnight.
She caught him peeking in her windows before.
Floyd tells detectives the situation came to a head on Tuesday night.
She called me Tuesday in the middle of the night, freaking out.
Nikki told Floyd that she had just recently driven home from work and found Marcus waiting for her on her porch.
Oh my God, he's on my front porch. What should I do?
You need to get out of there.
Detectives realize what they're hearing from Floyd directly contradicts what Marcus told Leland.
Marcus told Leland that Nikki never came home that night after he dropped them off.
I told her to come pick me up and I'd help get him to leave.
He felt like he could protect her if Marcus tried anything.
So she picked me up and we went back to the house.
Marcus, what are you doing here?
I just want to talk to you. That's all.
No! It's late, and I'm over this.
Come on, man. Go home.
But once again, Marcus refused to let up.
Marcus's entire demeanor shifted.
Man, who the hell do you think you are, huh?
Just leave!
He was threatening her and basically laying out what he was going to do if she left him.
Someone leave!
Whoa, whoa, whoa!
Waco detectives investigating the murder of Nikki Walker are speaking with her cousin, Floyd Jordan. Floyd has just revealed that Nikki's tumultuous relationship with her ex, Marcus Scott, came to a head on the night of February 2nd.
Man, who the hell do you think you are, huh?
Just leave!
Someone leave!
Whoa, whoa, whoa!
He was threatening her and basically laying out what he was going to do if she left him.
You're not leaving me. You know that, right?
Marcus, just stop, okay?
You're gonna regret it if you try to leave me. I promise you that.
Cool it, man.
Hands off me. Leave.
Floyd tells detectives that eventually Marcus stormed off in a rage. But it wasn't the last they heard from him that night.
Floyd says Marcus continued to text Nikki threatening messages.
Oh my God.
Damn, this dude isn't letting up.
What if he comes back?
The messages were so alarming that Nikki was afraid to be home alone.
Why don't you stay at my place tonight?
Okay, yeah. That might be for the better.
Let's get out of here.
Floyd tells detectives that the last time he or anyone else saw Nikki, she was leaving his house at 4 a.m. the next morning.
All of this wasn't just a coincidence. It was Marcus. I know it was him. He killed Nikki.
Floyd speculates that maybe he went back to her house to wait for her to show up there.
Whatever option you go with, to him, Marcus Scott was guilty.
Thank you so much, Floyd. We really do appreciate you coming forward with all this.
He became essential to our case because now we've got a timeline where almost immediately before the murder's committed and her body's found, we've got our suspect threatening to do her harm.
After speaking with Floyd, detectives do a deep dive into Marcus's past.
They knew, according to Leland, Marcus had been to prison before, but they didn't know the extent of his crimes.
They find that Marcus has an alarming, decade-long criminal history, including convictions for deadly conduct, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, and engaging in organized criminal activity.
And as they continue their investigation, detectives uncover another shocking piece of information.
In a substantially similar case, the detectives learned that in 2015, Marcus had broken into an ex-girlfriend's house and threatened to assault her.
When detectives contact the ex-girlfriend, she admits Marcus became violent with her on several occasions. And she says that she eventually broke up with him because of how violent and possessive that he became.
Just like with Nikki, Marcus would show up to her home unannounced and would begin following her around as well.
To detectives, it's evidence of a disturbing and escalating pattern of behavior, but it's still not proof of murder.
They knew they had to talk to Marcus Scott again and confront him with the information that they had learned.
So detectives bring him in under the guise of a simple follow-up interview.
Marcus, thanks for coming back in.
No problem.
And this time, something on Marcus's leg catches their eye.
Marcus has scratches on his shin.
He had long pants on when they previously interviewed him.
What happened to your leg? That looks pretty painful.
When the detectives ask how he obtained these scratches, Marcus tells them that they are the result of an accident he had with a screen door.
It scraped me pretty bad.
They become even more convinced that Marcus is not telling the whole story.
Remind us again, when was the last time you and Nikki got together?
Sunday.
You sure?
Yeah.
We have reason to believe that's not true.
He doesn't mention anything about Leland dropping him off at her home on Tuesday night.
You saw her Tuesday, didn't you?
You two had an argument that night?
What? No, I never saw her on Tuesday.
Well, you willing to take a polygraph test to prove that?
Sure.
Although reluctant, Marcus does agree to go through with the lie detector test.
Did you get into an argument with Nikki Walker on Tuesday night, April 2nd?
No.
Did you harm Nikki Walker?
No.
Initially, he had denied any involvement, denied any violence in the relationship in the past, but then he fails the polygraph.
However, when detectives confront Marcus about the polygraph test results, he still doesn't waver.
All right, Marcus, tests show you're being deceptive. It's time to start telling the truth.
No, I didn't kill her. We got into a few arguments. Yeah, but nothing too crazy.
Marcus admits that he had been violent with Nikki in the past. He stated at one point he actually hit Nikki to get off of him during a fight that they had, which Nikki initiated.
And then he admits to play choking her during an argument in January.
Play choke?
Yeah, but you know, we were just messing around, that's all.
He continues to maintain that he had absolutely nothing to do with the murder.
And unfortunately for investigators, the results of the polygraph can't be used as evidence in court.
There's really good reason for that. Polygraph examinations, they're not a lie detector test. What they do is they measure sweat levels, heart rate, things that generally can be associated with deception. So they certainly have their value. They're just not admissible in any courtroom.
Therefore, with no confession or any other hard evidence, detectives will be forced to let Marcus go once again.
While Marcus's lies in his troubling relationship with Nikki point towards guilt, the detectives have no forensic evidence to prove that Marcus committed this murder.
But before he leaves, detectives obtain a sample of Marcus's DNA.
It could be months until they receive the results from the DNA evidence found at the crime scene, and eventually those months turn into years.
The Waco DPS Crime Lab, where we send blood to be analyzed for DNA, it simply takes time. It's a time-consuming process, and across the state of Texas, Waco included, forensic crime labs are overloaded with the amount of things that they have to test.
Nikki's loved ones start to grow weary that they will never receive justice for what has been done to her.
But then, on March 19th, 2018, more than 2 years after Nikki was killed, there's a breakthrough.
Detectives received word from the crime lab that they have completed testing on the specimens submitted in Nikki's case.
Marcus's blood was found at the crime scene. There's no longer any doubt on who's behind this murder.
The investigators believe that the blood came from the cut that he had on his leg.
Armed with their smoking gun, detectives file a warrant for Marcus's arrest on April 6th, 2018.
Marcus is taken into custody that same day.
He refuses to answer any more questions and asks for a lawyer.
And while justice for Nikki is long overdue, it looks like her loved ones may have to wait even longer.
Marcus is deemed incompetent to stand trial due to a psychotic disorder.
He punches a nurse who's trying to provide him with treatment.
Waco investigators finally have Marcus Scott in custody for the murder of his ex-girlfriend, Nikki Walker.
2 years went by without them being able to convict anyone for Nikki's murder.
But now they have DNA evidence to prove that Marcus's blood was in Nikki's car. Along with other circumstantial evidence, this case seemed like a slam dunk.
But in February of 2020, the case hits another roadblock.
During a pretrial hearing in February of 2020, Marcus is deemed incompetent to stand trial due to a psychotic disorder.
In order to be incompetent, there has to be proof that an individual does not understand the consequences of decisions that they can make.
As a result of this diagnosis, Marcus's trial is paused until he is able to get the necessary treatment.
What usually happens in Texas is that somebody who is held incompetent, they get sent to a state hospital until they regain competence. Some people never regain competence, some people do.
All right, Mr. Scott, open up.
But even in the hospital, Marcus's violent tendencies emerge.
He punches a nurse who's trying to provide him with treatment. Ultimately, Marcus was charged with aggravated assault on a public servant, which is a third-degree felony.
3 years later, after undergoing additional psychiatric evaluation, Marcus is finally deemed competent to stand trial. But a new curveball hits this already muddled case.
Marcus goes blind during his time in the hospital due to glaucoma.
Marcus was a very different person than he was when he committed this murder. He was almost completely blind. It's a challenge from the outset because when jurors walk in, who they see seated at counsel table next to his attorney is a fairly nondescript, relatively thin blind man.
However, prosecutors warn jurors not to be fooled.
Prosecutors paint him as a vengeful ex who could not stand the rejection from Nikki Walker. They point to Marcus' previous relationships and arrest history as proof that his anger and controlling tendencies were spiraling completely out of control.
And we had family violence experts come and testify to those dynamics and what jurors can expect statistically when it comes to this kind of homicide. Any individual in a domestic relationship with a strangulation event in that relationship is 700% more likely to ultimately take that person's life.
And prosecutors believe that's exactly what happened to Nikki.
Marcus had become physically aggressive with her.
Marcus himself admitted to their arguments becoming violent at times.
As far as Nikki was concerned, this wasn't something that she was willing to put up with.
And when she broke up with Marcus at the end of January, prosecutors say it was like lighting a fuse on a time bomb.
Nikki was ready to end the relationship. And when you're talking about family violence cases, the most dangerous time is when the relationship is ending, because the control and power that the abusive partner has is about to end.
It finally sunk in that the relationship was over. Nikki was not going to take him back.
At that point, instead of letting Nikki walk away, Marcus decided that if he couldn't have her, no one else could either.
Prosecutors believe that after the Tuesday night confrontation with Floyd and Nikki, Marcus returned to Nikki's house.
She came back home around 4:30 a.m.
When Nikki returned to the house, Marcus was waiting on her.
Marcus, what are you doing?
Marcus managed to overpower Nikki and wrap his hands around her throat. He held his grip until she was dead.
With his adrenaline pumping, Marcus didn't realize his shin had smeared blood onto the passenger seat.
Then Marcus carved the obscenity into the side of her car.
Then he fled the scene and went back home as if nothing had happened.
The defense argues just because Marcus's blood was in the car doesn't prove anything.
Their story is a simple one, that we can't meet our burden, which is beyond a reasonable doubt, because the evidence or the investigation is insufficient to reach that burden.
Marcus claims that his blood must have gotten in the car from the other times that him and Nikki have had fights.
Prosecutors refuted this by saying the blood found in the passenger seat was bright red, indicating that it was fresh, as if it's only been there a day or two. And Marcus was seen with a wound on his leg.
When the jury retires to deliberate, it takes them just 30 minutes to return with a verdict. Marcus Scott is found guilty of first-degree felony murder.
Marcus was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Although Marcus received the maximum sentence for his crimes, Nikki's loved ones still struggle to deal with the loss that will now forever haunt them.
There's no winners when we come out of a trial like this.
Although I think that justice was served, I think that it's a lose-lose situation because now her children are left without a mom. It's just a very, very sad experience, especially for her children who now have to grow up without their mother. And then the memory of such a violent way that they lost their mother. So that's gonna impact them and everyone who knew her. It takes someone who is extremely deranged to do the sort of things that Marcus did. This crime was so senseless, and now we have to mourn the loss of this vibrant, beautiful person.
Nikki was a beloved family member, a devoted mother, and the community is far worse off not having her with us anymore.
Abuse is never okay. If you or someone you love is in an abusive relationship, there is help available. Call the Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-SAFE.
The rain had stopped only minutes before, leaving Manhattan wrapped in a thin layer of shimmering reflections. Red traffic lights stretched across the wet pavement like ribbons of liquid fire. Sirens echoed somewhere between the concrete towers, blending into the endless soundtrack of New York City. It was a familiar sound, one that millions of people had learned to ignore. For most, the wail of an ambulance meant that somewhere, a stranger's worst day was unfolding. For the people answering the phones inside the city's emergency communications center, every ringing line represented another life in crisis, another voice searching desperately for help. A mother trapped inside a crushed sedan. A construction worker thrown from his motorcycle. An elderly couple struck while crossing the street. A college student whose trembling hands could barely hold a phone after watching another driver run a red light. Every call began with fear. Every conversation was built on trust. When people dialed 911, they believed they were speaking into one of the safest systems in America. They assumed the person on the other end of the line would protect them, guide them, and keep their information secure while police officers, firefighters, and paramedics rushed toward the emergency. They believed that the names they spoke aloud, the addresses they whispered through tears, and the phone numbers they repeated between painful breaths would remain confidential. Those details were never meant to travel beyond the walls of emergency response. But sometimes betrayal does not arrive wearing a mask. Sometimes it answers the phone. Sometimes it types your information into a computer while speaking calmly enough to make you believe everything will be all right. Then, after hanging up, it quietly sells your pain to the highest bidder. Long before federal agents announced sweeping indictments in November of 2019, thousands of New Yorkers experienced something deeply unsettling. They had barely returned home from a collision. Some were still sitting inside emergency rooms waiting for x-rays. Others were trying to contact relatives or insurance companies while their damaged vehicles sat on tow trucks. Then their phones began ringing. The callers already knew their names. They knew they had been involved in a traffic accident. They knew where the crash had occurred. They knew enough to sound almost official. The voices were confident, reassuring, and strangely persistent. They promised experienced lawyers. They recommended medical clinics that specialized in accident injuries. They explained how victims could receive generous financial compensation. They insisted they were only trying to help. Many people wondered the same thing. How did they know? Some assumed police departments routinely shared accident reports. Others believed hospitals might have referred them. A few simply accepted the calls because everything had happened so quickly that questioning the source never crossed their minds. What almost nobody imagined was that their private information had begun traveling through an underground marketplace only minutes after their desperate plea for emergency assistance. Somewhere between the ringing telephone and the arrival of an ambulance, their identities had become merchandise. It was an invisible crime. No broken window. No stolen wallet. No masked intruder climbing through a bedroom window. Instead, confidential data quietly slipped through digital cracks inside one of the city's most trusted institutions. Unlike traditional organized crime, this operation required no dramatic escapes or violent confrontations. There were no underground warehouses stacked with narcotics. No armored trucks carrying cash. No cinematic gunfights beneath elevated train tracks. The currency was information. The commodity was human vulnerability. Every automobile accident created a fresh business opportunity. Every frightened caller became potential profit. The scheme flourished because it relied upon something that cannot easily be seen. Trust. Trust is one of the few things people surrender without hesitation during an emergency. A victim who has just survived a violent collision does not negotiate privacy policies. They answer questions because those questions may determine how quickly medical help arrives. They reveal their location because every passing second matters. They provide their names because emergency responders need to identify them. That trust was supposed to be sacred. Instead, prosecutors would later argue, it became part of an elaborate commercial network connecting emergency operators, patient recruiters, medical providers, attorneys, and insurance fraud conspirators. Each participant played a different role. Each participant earned a different reward. Each participant depended upon someone else's silence. For years, the machinery continued turning beneath the surface of everyday life. Millions of New Yorkers drove to work, crossed busy intersections, and trusted that if disaster struck, one phone call would summon honest help. Very few realized another audience might also be listening. The most disturbing criminal enterprises are not always the ones involving bloodshed. Sometimes the deepest wounds are carved into public confidence itself. Because once people begin questioning whether emergency services can truly protect their personal information, every future crisis carries an additional layer of fear. Should I tell them everything? Who else will know? Can I trust the voice asking these questions? These are thoughts that should never exist during an emergency. Yet this investigation suggested they already did. Federal investigators would eventually describe an operation stretching across years rather than weeks. Thousands of accident victims were allegedly affected. Millions of dollars flowed through clinics, legal offices, recruiters, and financial accounts. Confidential databases became sources of commercial leads. Human suffering evolved into predictable revenue streams. The business model was chilling in its simplicity. Wait for tragedy. Collect information. Sell access. Repeat. No dramatic innovation. No sophisticated technology beyond ordinary computer systems and telephones. Only ordinary people making extraordinary choices. That is perhaps what makes this story so unsettling. The individuals accused were not strangers lurking in dark alleyways. Some wore uniforms associated with public service. Others operated licensed medical facilities. Some practiced law. Their professions were built upon promises of helping people during moments of crisis. Instead, according to prosecutors, crisis itself became the product. Imagine surviving a collision that leaves your body shaking with adrenaline. Police officers arrive. Emergency personnel ask questions. Tow trucks remove twisted metal from the street while flashing lights illuminate shattered glass scattered across wet asphalt. You finally reach home exhausted. Your children ask if you're all right. Your spouse prepares dinner that nobody feels like eating. Then your cell phone rings. The stranger on the other end already knows. Not because they witnessed the crash. Not because you contacted them. Because somewhere inside the chain of emergency response, someone decided your information had a price. No physical evidence could reveal that betrayal. You would never notice a missing file. No alarm would sound. No notification would appear. The theft occurred inside databases and conversations hidden from public view. That secrecy allowed suspicion to remain scattered among isolated victims rather than focused upon a coordinated criminal enterprise. One unusual phone call seemed like coincidence. Hundreds formed a pattern. Thousands became impossible to ignore. Yet uncovering the truth required extraordinary patience. Investigators could not simply observe a robbery in progress. They needed to reconstruct invisible transactions involving electronic records, financial payments, confidential communications, and relationships stretching across multiple industries. Every suspicious payment required explanation. Every telephone conversation demanded context. Every leaked accident report raised another question. Who accessed it? When? Why? Who received it next? Money leaves footprints, but information leaves shadows. Following those shadows would require years of surveillance, cooperation between federal agencies, financial analysis, recorded conversations, search warrants, and relentless attention to details that most people would dismiss as ordinary office activity. By the time public announcements finally arrived in late 2019, what emerged was not merely a corruption case. It was a portrait of an ecosystem. An ecosystem where desperation generated customers. Where personal injury became inventory. Where confidential records traveled faster than ambulances. Where ethical boundaries slowly dissolved beneath financial incentives until actions that once seemed unthinkable became routine. No single moment transformed the system overnight. Corruption rarely announces itself with dramatic declarations. It grows quietly. One favor becomes another. One payment leads to another payment. One confidential record becomes 10. 10 become hundreds. Eventually the extraordinary begins feeling ordinary to the people participating in it. Outside, the city continued moving exactly as it always had. Yellow taxis crowded intersections. Subway trains rattled beneath busy sidewalks. Tourists photographed skyscrapers. Parents hurried children across crosswalks. Somewhere another driver glanced away for one fatal second before tires screamed against pavement. Another frightened voice reached for a cell phone. Another call connected to 911. Another promise of confidentiality was silently made. Whether that promise would be honored depended entirely upon the unseen decisions of people sitting behind computer screens, hidden far from flashing emergency lights and terrified families waiting beside broken vehicles. This is not the story of a serial killer. There are no crime scenes marked with yellow tape surrounding a body. Instead, the victims walked away alive, believing the worst part of their day had ended. They had no idea that the moment they asked for help, another chain of events had already begun. A chain driven not by compassion, but by opportunity. And before federal agents exposed the network, before indictments shook New York's emergency response community, before headlines questioned the integrity of one of America's most trusted public services, the operation had already taught a devastating lesson. In the wrong hands, even a cry for help can become a business transaction. New York City has always been a place where millions of stories unfold at the same time. At 6 o'clock on a Monday morning, delivery trucks weave through nearly empty streets while bakery owners unlock their storefronts. By 7, subway platforms begin filling with office workers balancing coffee cups and smartphones. By 8, traffic thickens into an endless stream of yellow taxis, buses, cyclists, impatient commuters, and tourists trying to navigate intersections they have never crossed before. The city breathes through constant movement. Every block offers a different rhythm. Every neighborhood tells a different story. Yet beneath the organized chaos lies an invisible network working every second of every day, connecting strangers during the worst moments of their lives. Few people ever think about that network until they desperately need it. For most New Yorkers, dialing 911 is something they hope they will never have to do. It is a number memorized in childhood and forgotten in adulthood until fear suddenly brings it rushing back. Whether someone witnesses a building fire in Brooklyn, a robbery in Queens, a heart attack in the Bronx, or a violent collision in Manhattan, those 3 digits become the shortest path between panic and professional help. Behind every emergency call stands an operation designed to function with military precision. Inside secured communications facilities operated by the New York Police Department, rows of dispatchers and emergency operators work around the clock beneath fluorescent lights that never dim. Holidays mean nothing inside these rooms. Snowstorms do not slow the ringing telephones. Christmas morning sounds much like any ordinary Tuesday. The city never stops producing emergencies, and the people answering those calls never stop listening. The work demands extraordinary emotional discipline. An operator may spend one moment calming a terrified child hiding in a bedroom while an intruder walks through the family home. Minutes later, another line connects to a driver trapped inside an overturned vehicle. Before that conversation ends, another phone begins ringing with someone reporting gunfire several blocks away. Every sentence matters. Every second counts. The people answering those calls are trained to separate emotion from procedure without losing compassion. They ask questions quickly but carefully. Where are you? Is anyone injured? Are they breathing? Can you move? Is the vehicle on fire? How many people are involved? The questions sound routine because they must. Behind each answer, dispatch software begins building a digital record that emergency responders will use before they even arrive at the scene. Addresses appear on computer screens. GPS locations update automatically. Medical priorities are assigned. Police officers receive electronic notifications. Ambulances begin moving before the caller has even finished describing what happened. To the public, it appears almost effortless. One phone call. Help arrives. Few people ever wonder what happens to the information they provide after the ambulance leaves. That information is among the most tightly protected data collected by any public agency. A typical emergency call involving a traffic accident contains far more than a simple request for assistance. It often includes the caller's full name, personal telephone number, exact location, vehicle description, license plate information, injuries suffered, names of passengers, insurance details mentioned during conversation, and observations about other drivers involved in the collision. Sometimes callers reveal even more. A mother may explain that her young daughter is crying in the back seat. An elderly man may disclose that he takes blood-thinning medication. Someone might mention returning home from chemotherapy. Another may confess they are several months pregnant and worried about the baby. None of those details are spoken casually. They are shared because frightened people believe they are speaking only to emergency professionals whose sole purpose is protecting life. American law recognizes exactly how sensitive this information is. Emergency communication systems exist under strict privacy requirements. Access is limited. Databases record user activity. Employees receive repeated training emphasizing confidentiality. Unauthorized disclosure of emergency records is not merely unethical. It can violate departmental policies, state regulations, federal laws, and the public trust upon which emergency services depend. The system assumes something fundamental: that those granted access will honor the responsibility. For decades, millions of emergency calls passed through New York's communications infrastructure without attracting public attention. The system was never perfect. No institution employing thousands of people ever is. Mistakes happened. Technical failures occurred. Human error occasionally delayed responses. But there remained one expectation that almost everyone considered unquestionable. Private information stayed private. That expectation formed the foundation of public confidence. Without it, emergency response itself becomes more difficult. Imagine someone hesitating before giving their address because they fear information might spread beyond police. Imagine victims refusing to disclose medical conditions because they no longer trust confidentiality. Imagine witnesses deciding not to call at all. Every hesitation costs time. Every missing detail increases risk. Confidence is therefore not an abstract concept inside emergency communications. It is operational necessity. Yet while citizens viewed the 911 system as a shield protecting their personal information, another industry viewed automobile accidents through an entirely different lens. Personal injury litigation has long been a significant business throughout the United States. Legitimate attorneys represent clients who have suffered genuine injuries through another driver's negligence. Honest physicians diagnose trauma that may not immediately appear after a collision. Physical therapists help patients recover movement. Insurance companies negotiate settlements. Courts resolve disputes when agreements cannot be reached. Most of this process serves an important legal purpose. People injured through no fault of their own deserve medical care and financial compensation when appropriate. However, wherever large amounts of insurance money exist, criminal opportunities often emerge nearby. Over many years, certain organized groups learned that traffic accidents could generate enormous profits if enough participants worked together. The formula was surprisingly straightforward. Locate accident victims before competitors. Convince them to visit specific medical clinics. Refer them to cooperating attorneys. Generate insurance claims. Collect fees and commissions at every stage. The faster they reached victims, the greater their chances of controlling the entire process. Speed became everything. Every hour mattered. If another law firm contacted the injured driver first, the opportunity might disappear. If a victim selected their own physician independently, profits could shrink dramatically. This intense competition created demand for something that should never have existed. Advanced knowledge. Knowing about a collision before anyone else represented a commercial advantage worth paying for. Normally, accident reports become available only after official processing, and even then, access follows legal procedures. Waiting meant losing valuable time. Someone, somewhere, began wondering whether there might be a faster route. Instead of waiting for public records, why not obtain information directly from the source? That single idea would eventually grow into a sprawling corruption investigation. It did not require sophisticated hackers breaking through encrypted government servers. It required something much simpler. People. People with authorized access. People willing to exchange confidentiality for cash. Like many corruption schemes, the operation allegedly evolved gradually rather than appearing fully formed. No evidence suggested every participant understood the entire network. Some individuals allegedly provided information. Others recruited patients. Others managed clinics. Others handled legal paperwork. Money flowed through multiple directions, making the complete picture difficult to recognize from any single viewpoint. Compartmentalization became protection. One participant might know only the runner collecting names. Another knew only the clinic receiving patients. Another handled financial distributions. Meanwhile, accident victims remained completely unaware that their personal information had traveled far beyond emergency response systems. The individuals known within the industry as runners occupied a particularly important position. The term sounds almost harmless. In reality, prosecutors have long associated runners with schemes designed to aggressively recruit accident victims immediately after collisions. Their purpose was not providing emergency assistance. Their purpose was acquisition. Some appeared inside hospital waiting rooms. Others contacted victims by telephone. Some approached damaged vehicles near accident scenes. They often presented themselves as friendly advisors simply trying to help confused people navigate insurance claims. Behind the reassuring smiles often stood financial incentives invisible to the victims. Every successful referral could produce commissions. Every signed client represented future income. Every injured person became another opportunity. The methods varied. Sometimes callers spoke gently, emphasizing concern. Other times they applied subtle pressure, warning that delays might reduce compensation. Some implied connections with police departments or insurance companies without directly making false claims. The goal remained constant. Gain trust quickly. Secure commitment before anyone else. Move the client into the network. What made New York particularly vulnerable was its sheer volume. On an average day, countless traffic accidents occur across the 5 boroughs. Minor fender benders. Multi-vehicle collisions. Pedestrian impacts. Commercial truck crashes. Motorcycle accidents. Cyclists struck at busy intersections. Each incident generated reports. Each report contained names. Each name potentially carried financial value. Most people never noticed patterns because they experienced only one accident. Investigators, however, eventually began observing something much larger. Victims repeatedly described receiving unsolicited telephone calls almost immediately after contacting emergency services. The timing appeared remarkably consistent. Sometimes less than an hour. Occasionally only minutes. The coincidence became increasingly difficult to dismiss. Information simply should not move that quickly through legitimate channels. Official reports require processing. Insurance companies need notification. Legal documents take time. Yet strangers somehow knew intimate details almost instantly. Questions quietly accumulated. Who first accessed the records? How were they copied? Who transmitted them? Who paid? How long had this been happening? Finding answers would prove extraordinarily difficult because digital information rarely leaves obvious fingerprints. Unlike physical theft, copying electronic records does not remove the original file. Nothing appears missing. Nothing appears broken. The database remains intact. Only access logs, financial transactions, communications, and human decisions reveal that anything improper occurred at all. Meanwhile, life inside New York continued exactly as before. Emergency operators reported to work. Police officers answered calls. Ambulances raced through crowded avenues. Citizens placed their faith in institutions they had trusted for generations. Very few realized that somewhere behind secure doors, every newly entered accident report could represent far more than an emergency response. To the right person, at the right moment, it could represent the beginning of another business deal. No screaming. No violence. No dramatic confrontation. Just a name appearing on a computer screen. A telephone number copied onto a piece of paper. A message quietly forwarded. A payment quietly received. The entire exchange could take less than a minute. Yet that single minute might transform someone's private tragedy into a commodity circulating through an underground marketplace built upon access, influence, and silence. The city's emergency communication system had been created to save lives. For years, according to federal investigators, someone had allegedly discovered another use for it. Not rescue. Not protection. Not justice. Profit. Every investigation begins with victims. Sometimes they have names that become known around the world. Their photographs appear on television screens. Families stand before microphones pleading for answers. Their stories become symbols of unimaginable loss. This case was different. There was no single face that represented the crime. No candlelight vigil filled a neighborhood park. No grieving family waited outside a courthouse for justice after a loved one was taken. Instead, there were thousands of ordinary people whose lives intersected with the same hidden system without ever realizing it. Their experiences seemed too small to attract headlines on their own. A phone call that arrived a little too soon. A stranger who somehow knew too much. An uncomfortable feeling that something about the situation was deeply wrong. Separated, their stories sounded like coincidences. Together, they revealed the outline of one of the most disturbing breaches of public trust in New York City's emergency response system. To understand the true impact of the case, it is necessary to step away from court documents, financial records, and criminal indictments. Instead, imagine the city through the eyes of the people who unknowingly became products. On a grey autumn afternoon in Queens, a 34-year-old father finishes another long day repairing elevators in Midtown Manhattan. His work has taken him through construction sites, apartment towers, and office buildings where nobody notices the men who keep elevators moving until they suddenly stop working. He leaves work exhausted. His daughter has a school concert that evening. He promised he would not miss it. Traffic is heavier than usual, and rain has begun to fall hard enough to blur the windshield despite the wipers working at full speed. Drivers grow impatient. Horns echo between rows of buildings as everyone races to get home before rush hour becomes complete gridlock. At a busy intersection, another vehicle attempts to beat a yellow light. The impact comes without warning. Metal folds into metal. Glass explodes across the pavement. The sound is so violent that nearby pedestrians instinctively duck before turning toward the intersection. For several seconds, everything becomes strangely quiet inside the damaged vehicle. The father blinks repeatedly, trying to understand what has just happened. His ears ring. His hands shake uncontrollably. His daughter's violin rests on the passenger seat, now lying on the floor beneath shattered glass. Then the pain arrives. A sharp ache spreads across his shoulder and neck. Someone outside is yelling. Another person pounds gently on the driver's side window. Are you okay? Can you hear me? He reaches for his cell phone with trembling fingers. 3 numbers. 9. 1. 1. The operator answers almost immediately. A calm voice asks for his location. She requests his name. His phone number. Whether anyone else is inside the vehicle. Whether he can breathe normally. Whether he sees smoke. Whether he feels trapped. He answers each question because every answer seems necessary. The voice remains composed. Professional. Comforting. Police officers and paramedics are already on the way. Stay where you are if it is safe. Help is coming. Within minutes, emergency vehicles flood the intersection. The road closes. Photographs are taken. Witnesses provide statements. The father is transported to a nearby hospital where doctors determine he has suffered soft tissue injuries but no broken bones. He considers himself fortunate. His daughter hugs him later that evening, relieved he survived. The accident already feels like something they will eventually leave behind. The following morning, his cell phone rings. He assumes the call is from his insurance company. Instead, an unfamiliar voice greets him by name. The caller speaks confidently. He explains that he understands the father was injured in a traffic accident yesterday afternoon. He says experienced attorneys are prepared to help maximize financial compensation. He recommends a medical clinic specializing in accident injuries. Appointments are available immediately. Transportation can even be arranged. The father interrupts. How did you get my number? The caller avoids giving a direct answer. He simply repeats that he is trying to help. The conversation lasts less than 2 minutes. Yet after hanging up, an unsettling thought remains. He never contacted anyone. His insurance company has not even processed the claim. The official police report cannot possibly be available already. So who told them? Across the city in Brooklyn, another story unfolds. A retired schoolteacher spends her Saturday visiting her sister. She has lived in New York for nearly 50 years and knows every shortcut through the borough. As she slowly enters an intersection, another driver loses control on rain-soaked pavement. The collision sends both vehicles spinning. She escapes with bruises and severe anxiety but is otherwise physically unharmed. At the emergency room, she gives her contact information to hospital staff after first speaking with a 911 operator at the scene. Her family arrives. Doctors discharge her several hours later. She returns home emotionally exhausted. Before breakfast the following morning, the telephone rings. A cheerful woman introduces herself as someone familiar with automobile injury cases. She already knows the retired teacher's name. She knows where the accident occurred. She knows another vehicle was involved. She insists that waiting too long could reduce insurance compensation. The teacher politely declines. An hour later, another caller contacts her. Then another. By evening, she has received 4 separate solicitations from organizations she has never heard of. Her daughter jokes that the entire city seems to know about yesterday's accident. Neither of them realizes the joke is disturbingly close to reality. In the Bronx, a college student riding a motorcycle is struck by a delivery van while commuting to class. The impact throws him onto the pavement. He suffers fractured ribs, a broken wrist, and a concussion. Witnesses call 911 before he regains consciousness. His mother receives the devastating news while at work. She rushes to the hospital, terrified. The following day, while sitting beside her son's hospital bed, her cell phone rings repeatedly. Unknown numbers. Different voices. Different organizations. The same message. Legal representation. Medical referrals. Financial recovery. She becomes angry. Who keeps giving these people our information? Nobody has an answer. The pattern repeats again and again throughout the city. Construction workers. Taxi drivers. Delivery couriers. Office employees. Tourists. Parents driving children home from school. Senior citizens visiting grocery stores. Different boroughs. Different backgrounds. Different neighborhoods. One common experience. The calls arrive with unsettling speed. Most victims never file complaints. Life after an accident is already complicated enough. There are damaged vehicles to repair. Medical appointments to schedule. Insurance paperwork to complete. Lost wages to calculate. Family responsibilities continue despite physical pain. An unwanted telephone call becomes another frustration rather than something worth investigating. Others simply assume this is how the system works. Perhaps police departments routinely notify lawyers. Perhaps hospitals sell patient information. Perhaps insurance companies share accident reports. The assumptions differ. The result remains identical. Questions disappear without answers. The callers understand human psychology remarkably well. Most accident victims exist in a state of confusion during the first 24 hours. Pain medications cloud judgment. Fear magnifies uncertainty. Financial concerns begin almost immediately. How expensive will treatment become? Will insurance cover everything? How long before work resumes? What if injuries become permanent? During moments like these, confident voices offering immediate solutions become surprisingly persuasive. Some callers sound compassionate. Others emphasize urgency. Nearly all present themselves as experienced professionals capable of guiding victims through an unfamiliar process. Many victims accept appointments simply because they do not know where else to turn. That decision often marks the beginning of a carefully designed pipeline. A visit to a particular clinic. Referral to a specific attorney. Medical evaluations. Treatment plans. Insurance claims. Settlement negotiations. Each stage potentially generates income for different participants. From the victim's perspective, everything appears legitimate. Clinics have waiting rooms. Doctors wear white coats. Law offices display framed diplomas. Receptionists smile politely. Paperwork resembles every other medical office. Very little suggests that the patient's journey may have begun not through honest advertising or personal recommendation, but through the unauthorized sale of confidential emergency information. The emotional damage caused by these experiences is difficult to measure. Physical injuries eventually heal. Vehicles can be repaired or replaced. Medical bills may be negotiated. Trust is different. Once broken, it rarely returns unchanged. Imagine discovering years later that one of the first people you trusted during an emergency may have participated in exposing your private information. The realization changes memories. Conversations that once felt reassuring become unsettling in retrospect. Victims begin replaying those moments inside their minds. Did they really need my phone number? Did they really have to ask for all those details? Who else listened? Who else saw the report? Questions multiply faster than answers. Many of the individuals later identified in court filings never met the people whose information they allegedly handled. The victims existed only as names on computer screens. Telephone numbers, addresses, case numbers, digital records. Distance made exploitation easier. It is easier to ignore another person's humanity when they become data instead of faces. A spreadsheet never cries. A database never trembles after surviving a collision. A digital file cannot describe the fear of hearing twisted metal scrape across asphalt or wondering whether a child in the back seat is still breathing. But behind every electronic record stood someone who had experienced one of the most frightening moments of their life. Someone who believed that asking for help would lead only to help. Not marketing. Not recruitment. Not profit. As investigators later reconstructed the alleged scheme, they began seeing what the victims themselves never could. One isolated telephone call meant little. Hundreds of similar calls following hundreds of separate accidents suggested coincidence. Thousands pointed toward something far more organized. The victims had never known one another. They lived across every borough. They worked different jobs. They belonged to different communities. Yet invisible lines connected them all. Those lines ran through emergency communication systems designed to protect them. Perhaps the greatest tragedy of this case is not measured in dollars or indictments. It is measured in hesitation. Every future accident victim deserves to speak freely when calling 911. To answer every question honestly. To trust every instruction completely. That trust saves lives. When confidence in that system is damaged, even slightly, every emergency becomes more dangerous. Because somewhere, someday, another frightened driver may pause before giving personal information. Another injured passenger may wonder who else is listening. Another family may hesitate for just a few precious seconds. And in emergencies, seconds have always been the most valuable currency of all. For the victims, the incident lasted only a few violent seconds. A screech of tires. The deafening crash of twisting steel. The smell of burned rubber hanging in the air. A spinning world suddenly brought to a stop. For the people operating the scheme, however, the incident had only just begun. The collision itself was never the destination. It was the opening signal. Somewhere across New York City, dozens of automobile accidents occurred every single day. Most never made the evening news. A distracted driver glanced at a text message for 1 second too long. A taxi stopped abruptly to pick up a passenger. Rain turned smooth asphalt into a sheet of ice. An exhausted delivery driver misjudged the distance between two vehicles. Each crash unfolded differently, yet they all entered the same emergency system. To emergency responders, every accident represented a call for help. To the alleged conspiracy, every accident represented fresh inventory. The transformation happened almost invisibly. A frightened caller dialed 911. The call reached an emergency operator trained to remain calm under pressure. Questions followed a familiar script. What is your location? How many people are injured? Can anyone move? Is there smoke? Is anyone trapped? The operator listened carefully while entering information into the dispatch system. Every answer appeared on a computer screen. Every update helped police officers and paramedics prepare before reaching the scene. The technology existed for one purpose: saving lives through faster, more accurate emergency response. According to federal prosecutors, somewhere within that legitimate process, another sequence allegedly began. The information did not remain where it was supposed to. Instead, confidential details were copied. Sometimes it required only seconds. A name. A telephone number. An address. The location of the collision. The time. Enough information to identify the victim before anyone else could. Unlike dramatic movie depictions of cybercrime involving sophisticated hackers and flashing computer screens, there was nothing cinematic about the alleged conduct. No encrypted passwords were cracked. No firewalls collapsed. No anonymous figures wearing hooded sweatshirts typed furiously in dark rooms. The system had already opened its doors. The people accused of leaking information already possessed legitimate access. That access was the key. Imagine an ordinary workday inside an emergency communications center. Telephones ring continuously. Operators move efficiently from one call to the next. Supervisors monitor performance. Computer monitors display incident after incident. The atmosphere rewards speed, concentration, and accuracy. Everyone appears busy because everyone genuinely is. Within such an environment, a simple act, writing down a telephone number or discreetly capturing information from a computer screen, could appear completely ordinary unless someone knew exactly what to watch for. According to investigators, that ordinary appearance became part of the protection. Nothing about the emergency itself suggested criminal activity. Police officers responded exactly as expected. Firefighters secured dangerous intersections. Paramedics treated injuries. Tow truck operators removed damaged vehicles. Meanwhile, somewhere beyond the flashing lights, confidential information allegedly began moving through entirely different channels. The next stage depended upon people known throughout fraudulent personal injury networks as runners. The title sounded harmless. Almost athletic. Someone who simply carried messages from one place to another. In reality, runners occupied one of the most important positions within the alleged enterprise. They served as the bridge between stolen information and profitable business. Once they received a victim's contact details, speed became everything. Minutes mattered. Every competitor represented a threat. If another attorney established contact first, the opportunity could disappear. If victims sought medical care independently, the referral fees vanished. If families consulted trusted friends before answering unknown calls, suspicion might grow. The race had already begun. Telephones became the primary weapon. Some victims received calls before leaving the emergency room. Others heard from recruiters while arranging repairs for their damaged vehicles. Several later described being stunned that complete strangers already seemed familiar with accidents that had happened only hours earlier. The conversations often followed remarkably similar patterns. The caller sounded calm, professional, helpful, never openly aggressive. Instead of frightening victims, they reassured them. They spoke confidently about legal rights. They warned against accepting insurance company offers too quickly. They recommended medical examinations even for injuries that appeared minor. Neck pain, they explained, sometimes developed days after an accident. Back injuries could worsen unexpectedly. Everything sounded reasonable. That was precisely what made the calls so effective. Legitimate advice and hidden motives became intertwined until distinguishing one from the other became almost impossible. Most accident victims lacked legal expertise. Few had experienced serious collisions before. The people calling understood that uncertainty. They presented themselves as guides through a confusing process. Many victims naturally listened. Some accepted appointments immediately. Others asked questions. How did you hear about my accident? The answers rarely satisfied. Sometimes callers claimed they monitored public records. Sometimes they vaguely referenced accident databases. Others simply redirected the conversation back toward medical treatment and financial compensation. The objective remained unchanged. Keep the victim engaged. Avoid discussing the source. Move to the next step. Once victims entered participating clinics, the operation allegedly became significantly more profitable. The waiting rooms looked no different from countless legitimate medical offices throughout New York. Reception desks, medical forms, X-ray equipment, physical therapy rooms. Everything appeared normal. Doctors examined patients. Treatment plans were developed. Appointments scheduled. Nothing immediately suggested criminal conduct. Yet investigators later argued that some clinics functioned as essential components within a much larger financial ecosystem. Patient referrals generated income. Medical treatment supported insurance claims. Legal representation followed. Every participant benefited if the victim remained inside the network. Insurance companies eventually became the source of enormous financial payouts. Motor vehicle accidents often involve substantial settlements when injuries are serious. Medical expenses, lost wages, pain and suffering, long-term rehabilitation. These categories exist to compensate genuinely injured people. The legal system depends upon accurate diagnoses, honest documentation, and ethical representation. According to prosecutors, corruption entered when financial incentives became more important than patient welfare. Every additional referral represented another opportunity. Every new accident created another customer before the victim even realized they had entered a marketplace. What made the alleged conspiracy particularly disturbing was not merely the pursuit of money. Businesses pursue profits every day through lawful competition. The problem lay in the origin of the information. Emergency communications are fundamentally different from commercial lead generation. A person calling 911 is not requesting advertisements. They are requesting rescue. The distinction is enormous. Imagine standing beside a wrecked vehicle while watching paramedics treat your spouse. Your heart pounds. Your hands shake. You answer every question because professionals tell you that accurate information helps save lives. Never would you imagine those same answers might later determine which law office telephones you first. The emotional vulnerability surrounding accidents became one of the scheme's greatest advantages. Trauma changes human decision-making. Psychologists have long understood that individuals experiencing sudden stress often seek certainty wherever they can find it. After a collision, uncertainty surrounds almost everything. Will the injuries become permanent? Who caused the accident? Will insurance pay? How much will repairs cost? Can I still work? The first confident voice offering solutions often gains enormous influence. That influence carried financial value. According to the federal investigation, money allegedly flowed backward through the referral chain. Victims generated cases. Cases generated insurance claims. Claims generated settlements. Settlements generated commissions. Commissions allegedly funded additional payments for confidential information. The cycle reinforced itself. More information produced more clients. More clients produced more revenue. More revenue encouraged further leaks. The conspiracy, investigators argued, did not depend upon spectacular criminal acts. It depended upon repetition. Again. 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 One accident. Another accident. Another. Thousands of moments that individually appeared insignificant gradually accumulated into millions of dollars. Outside the system, no obvious warning signs existed. New Yorkers continued trusting emergency services. Police officers continued responding professionally to collisions. Most emergency operators faithfully honored their responsibilities. The overwhelming majority of public servants had absolutely no involvement in the alleged misconduct. That fact makes the accusations against those who did participate even more striking. Trustworthy institutions rely upon countless honest employees performing difficult work every day. Sometimes only a handful of individuals are capable of damaging confidence built over generations. As federal investigators would later explain, the conspiracy allegedly operated for years before finally attracting sufficient attention. The duration mattered. Long-term corruption rarely survives through luck alone. It survives because routines develop. Participants become comfortable. Small ethical compromises evolve into normal business practices. Money arrives regularly. Questions become less frequent. Risk begins feeling distant. Perhaps the most unsettling feature of the alleged operation was its complete dependence upon human suffering. Without automobile accidents, there would be no confidential information to steal. Without injured victims, there would be no medical referrals. Without fear and confusion, there would be no opportunity to manipulate desperate decisions. The business model required tragedy. Not catastrophic tragedy covered by national headlines. Ordinary tragedy. The kind that happens every day. A mother driving children home from school. A delivery driver working overtime. A retired couple returning from grocery shopping. A college student riding home after class. People whose names would never appear in newspapers. People whose pain remained private. Until someone allegedly decided privacy itself could be sold. The victims believed the worst part of their day had been the collision. They believed survival marked the end of the crisis. According to prosecutors, for others, the collision represented only the beginning of a profitable chain of events. Every emergency call echoed beyond the dispatch center. Every confidential record carried potential value. Every injured stranger became another file moving quietly through an invisible marketplace hidden behind respectable offices, professional titles, and reassuring voices. The crashes themselves lasted only moments. The consequences of those moments traveled much farther than anyone dialing 911 could ever have imagined. The first clues did not emerge from a dramatic raid or a whistleblower walking into an FBI office carrying a box of secret documents. They emerged from something far quieter. Patterns. Patterns are often where the truth begins. A single victim receiving an unexpected phone call after a traffic accident could easily be dismissed as coincidence. Two victims with similar experiences might simply be bad luck. Even a dozen complaints scattered across New York City would be difficult to connect in a metropolis of more than 8 million people. But patterns have a habit of growing louder the longer they are ignored. Somewhere inside insurance companies, legal offices, and law enforcement agencies, people began noticing the same strange sequence unfolding over and over again. An accident occurred. Someone dialed 911. Emergency responders arrived. Then, before official reports could reasonably circulate through legal channels, accident victims began receiving calls from people they had never contacted. The speed was impossible to ignore. Information was traveling faster than the system itself. Under normal circumstances, accident reports follow a carefully controlled process. Police officers complete their documentation after securing the scene. Reports are reviewed, entered into official databases, and eventually become available through lawful procedures. Attorneys representing injured clients can later obtain records through legitimate requests. Insurance companies gather information through their own investigations. That process takes time. Sometimes days. Sometimes longer. Yet victims repeatedly described receiving phone calls within hours of the collision. Occasionally, the calls came so quickly that the damaged vehicles had not even been removed from the repair yard. The timeline simply made no sense. For experienced investigators, impossible timelines usually point toward one conclusion. Someone has access they should not have. The earliest concerns did not immediately expose a vast conspiracy. Instead, they appeared as isolated irregularities. An insurance investigator questioned how competing attorneys seemed to know about clients almost instantly. A victim mentioned feeling uncomfortable because strangers knew details that had never been shared publicly. Another complaint surfaced months later. Then another. Each incident looked insignificant on its own. Together, they suggested something hidden beneath the surface. Meanwhile, inside New York's emergency communications system, everything appeared ordinary. Operators continued answering thousands of calls every day. Computer terminals processed enormous amounts of information. Police officers responded to emergencies across all 5 boroughs. Nothing visible suggested confidential data was escaping into private hands. That is one of the defining characteristics of information crimes. There is no shattered window. No missing safe. No empty evidence locker. The original records remain exactly where they belong. Only copies move. And copies are almost impossible for victims to detect. Imagine opening your front door one morning and discovering that nothing inside your home has been disturbed. Every photograph remains on the wall. Every piece of jewelry sits untouched. Your wallet is still on the kitchen counter. Nothing appears stolen. Weeks later, you discover that someone secretly copied every document inside your filing cabinet before quietly leaving. The originals never disappeared. Yet your privacy has been violated just the same. That was the challenge investigators faced. They were not searching for missing evidence. They were searching for invisible movement. Who looked at confidential records? When? Why? Who contacted victims afterward? Where did the money go? The answers would require patience measured not in days but in years. As investigators slowly examined complaints, another reality became increasingly apparent. The alleged operation was too consistent to depend upon random chance. Victims were not being approached by dozens of unrelated organizations making lucky guesses. The calls followed recognizable patterns. Specific clinics appeared repeatedly. Certain legal offices surfaced again and again. Recruiters seemed unusually well informed. The names changed. The voices changed. The structure remained remarkably similar. That consistency suggested organization. Organization implied planning. Planning implied leadership. Somewhere, someone was coordinating far more than isolated information leaks. Federal investigators would later argue that what appeared from the outside to be scattered misconduct was actually part of an interconnected business model. Each participant relied upon someone else. Emergency information reached recruiters. Recruiters guided victims toward cooperating medical providers. Medical providers referred patients to attorneys. Legal claims generated substantial insurance settlements. Money then flowed backward through the network. The discovery of that structure did not happen overnight. It emerged piece by piece, almost like assembling a 1,000-piece puzzle without knowing what the finished picture should look like. Financial investigators began examining transactions that seemed inconsistent with ordinary business operations. Why would certain individuals receive repeated payments that lacked obvious explanations? Why did money move between businesses with overlapping connections? Why did particular names continue appearing alongside one another despite operating in supposedly independent professions? Money rarely lies. People do. Bank records became silent witnesses. Unlike human memory, financial transactions leave timestamps. Deposits. Withdrawals. Transfers. Checks. Wire payments. Each movement created another breadcrumb leading investigators deeper into the alleged conspiracy. At the same time, investigators studied communication records. Telephone calls. Text messages. Business relationships. Professional connections. No single conversation proved criminal intent. But dozens of conversations, viewed alongside financial evidence and victim timelines, gradually began revealing something much larger. The investigation became less about one leaked report and more about understanding an entire ecosystem. Another crucial clue came from the victims themselves. Although most never knew one another, their experiences sounded remarkably alike. Nearly everyone described callers who already possessed accurate information. Many remembered being surprised by how quickly they had been contacted. Several specifically recalled asking how the caller knew about the accident. Almost none received satisfying answers. Those similarities carried enormous evidentiary value. Independent witnesses describing nearly identical experiences often indicate a common underlying source. The victims had no reason to invent matching stories. They lived in different boroughs, worked different jobs, belonged to different communities. Some were elderly. Others were teenagers. Some suffered serious injuries. Others escaped with relatively minor pain. The only thing connecting them was one emergency telephone call. As investigators continued gathering evidence, another unsettling realization emerged. This alleged conspiracy could not succeed without trust. Not merely the trust of victims. The trust of institutions. Emergency communications systems operate because society grants certain individuals extraordinary access to sensitive information. Operators hear intimate conversations every day. Police officers review confidential reports. Medical professionals receive private health information. Attorneys handle personal legal matters. Every profession depends upon ethical obligations that extend beyond written policies. When even a small number of individuals abandon those obligations, the damage spreads far beyond individual victims. Public confidence begins to erode. Investigators understood that recovering evidence alone would not be enough. If charges were eventually filed, the public would inevitably ask difficult questions. How could this happen? How long had it continued? Why wasn't it discovered sooner? Those questions carried enormous significance because they touched the credibility of institutions responsible for protecting millions of people. Inside the investigative teams, there was growing awareness that they were no longer examining ordinary insurance fraud. The allegations pointed toward something more disturbing. Emergency systems exist because people are at their most vulnerable when they use them. The caller reporting a collision does not negotiate confidentiality agreements. They simply trust. That trust forms the foundation upon which every dispatcher, police officer, firefighter, and paramedic performs their work. If confidential information can quietly escape that system, every future emergency carries additional uncertainty. The challenge now facing investigators was no longer determining whether suspicious activity existed. They had crossed that threshold. The challenge had become proving it beyond a reasonable doubt. Suspicion is not enough inside a courtroom. Patterns alone do not secure convictions. Investigators would need evidence that directly connected confidential information to financial rewards. They would need to identify participants, document communications, trace payments, demonstrate intent. Every piece had to withstand intense legal scrutiny. Every conclusion required support. Every allegation demanded proof. The invisible crime was beginning to take shape. Not through dramatic confessions. Not through sensational discoveries. But through thousands of tiny details that, once assembled, revealed something impossible to dismiss. Like raindrops slowly filling a river, each complaint, each financial record, each unexplained phone call, and each suspicious relationship added another layer to the growing picture. By the time investigators stepped back to view everything together, they no longer saw isolated incidents. They saw a system. A system hidden behind ordinary office buildings. behind respectable job titles, behind professional business cards, behind computer screens displaying emergency information that should never have traveled beyond the people sworn to protect it. The accident scenes themselves had long since been cleaned. Broken glass had been swept away. Damaged vehicles repaired or scrapped. Victims had attempted to move on with their lives. Yet the evidence those accidents created continued traveling through financial records, communication logs, and confidential databases. The physical wreckage had disappeared. The digital trail had not. Somewhere within that trail lay the proof investigators had been searching for. The discovery phase was ending. The hunt for those responsible was about to enter an entirely different stage, one that would require far more than recognizing patterns. It would require stepping into the shadows where those patterns began. The deeper investigators looked, the more complicated the picture became. What first appeared to be a simple case of unauthorized information sharing began revealing the structure of a much larger operation. The challenge was no longer identifying whether private accident information had been misused. The challenge was determining exactly who was involved, how far the network reached, and how many people had benefited from the exploitation of confidential emergency records. Because in a conspiracy, the person holding the information is not always the person making the most money. The person making the most money is not always the person giving the orders. And the person giving the orders is often the person investigators must find last. The alleged network surrounding the sale of 911 accident data was built around layers of separation. Each person occupied a different position. Each participant saw only a portion of the operation. This structure created distance between the original source of the information and the final financial rewards. A dispatcher or emergency operator might see only a name appearing on a screen. A recruiter might see only a phone number. A clinic might see only a new patient arriving for treatment. A lawyer might see only another accident case entering the office. But investigators believed these separate actions were connected by a single purpose: turning emergency information into profit. The first major challenge was identifying the source. The emergency system handled an enormous volume of information every day. Thousands of employees interacted with data. Many people had legitimate reasons to access accident records. A police officer responding to a collision needed details. A supervisor monitoring operations needed information. Dispatchers required access to perform their duties. The question was not simply, who looked at the records? The question was, who looked at them for the wrong reason? That distinction transformed the investigation. Investigators began examining access patterns. Computer systems record activity. Every login. Every search. Every interaction with certain databases. Digital records that most people never think about became potential witnesses. A person might deny accessing information. A computer system could tell a different story. The investigators searched for unusual behavior. Were certain employees repeatedly viewing accident records unrelated to their assignments? Were specific incidents followed by suspicious financial activity? Were certain names appearing before waves of unsolicited victim calls? The answers slowly began narrowing the field. Among those examined were employees within the NYPD's emergency communications operations. The accusations were especially damaging because these employees were not outsiders attempting to break into a government system. They were insiders. They had been trusted with access because their jobs required them to handle sensitive information. That access was supposed to be protected by professional responsibility. Instead, prosecutors alleged that some individuals used it as a source of personal income. One of the names identified during the investigation was Angela Mayers, a 911 operator accused of participating in the scheme. According to prosecutors, she and other employees allegedly provided confidential accident information to people connected with the personal injury industry in exchange for financial benefits. The accusations described a disturbing exchange. A person experiencing one of the most frightening moments of their life would call emergency services. The operator would collect information designed to help them. But behind the scenes, that same information could allegedly become valuable to people looking for potential clients. The alleged betrayal was not only financial. It was emotional. The people involved were accused of taking advantage of the exact moment when victims were most dependent on public trust. Investigators also examined the role of a serving NYPD officer who was accused of involvement. For law enforcement officials, allegations involving one of their own carry unique consequences. Police departments depend heavily on public cooperation. People report crimes because they believe officers will protect them. Witnesses come forward because they trust their information will be handled responsibly. Victims answer questions because they believe those answers will be used to help them. When an officer is accused of using confidential information for personal gain, the damage extends beyond one individual case. It creates doubt about the institution itself. Was this only one person? Were others involved? How long did it continue? Could citizens trust that their private information would remain protected? These questions became central to the investigation and to the public reaction afterward. As investigators followed the trail, they encountered another group that played an important role in the alleged operation. The medical providers. At first glance, medical clinics may seem far removed from emergency dispatch centers. One handles urgent calls. The other treats injuries. But in the world of personal injury fraud investigations, medical providers often become a critical link. Insurance claims require documentation. Documentation requires medical records. Medical records support treatment expenses. Treatment expenses influence settlement amounts. The larger the claim, the greater the potential profit for everyone connected to the case. Investigators examined whether certain clinics received an unusually high number of accident patients referred through questionable channels. They looked for patterns. Were patients arriving from the same sources? Were similar injuries being reported repeatedly? Were treatment plans unusually aggressive compared with the severity of accidents? These questions were not about legitimate medical care. Many accident victims truly require treatment. Many physicians genuinely help injured people recover. The investigation focused only on whether certain individuals exploited the medical system as part of a fraudulent business structure. The legal professionals involved faced similar scrutiny. Attorneys have a legitimate and essential role in protecting the rights of injured people. A person harmed by another driver's negligence may need legal representation to receive fair compensation. But investigators alleged that some attorneys were not simply receiving clients through normal channels. They were allegedly connected to a system designed to deliver clients before those clients could make independent decisions. The difference was crucial. A lawyer advertising services openly is operating within the law. A lawyer receiving confidential emergency information obtained through unauthorized means is facing an entirely different situation. The investigation began exposing a chain where every participant depended upon the previous one. Without leaked information, recruiters had no advantage. Without recruiters, clinics and lawyers had fewer guaranteed clients. Without medical treatment and legal claims, insurance settlements would not generate profits. Every part of the structure supported another. Remove one piece, and the entire system weakened. This was why investigators focused heavily on financial connections. Money was the common language spoken by everyone involved. A dispatcher might not know the final settlement amount. A recruiter might not know exactly how confidential information was obtained. A clinic might not know who originally provided the lead. But payments created connections. A small transfer here. A repeated deposit there. A pattern of transactions between people who claimed no relationship. Financial records became a map. They showed relationships that people might deny. They revealed movements that conversations could hide. They demonstrated that the alleged operation was not based on random favors. It was based on exchange. Information for money. Access for profit. Trust for personal gain. As the investigation expanded, law enforcement agencies faced another challenge. The defendants were not all criminals with obvious histories. Many appeared to live ordinary professional lives. They went to work, paid bills, interacted with neighbors, maintained reputations. That complexity often makes white-collar and corruption investigations particularly difficult. People expect criminals to look dangerous. They expect obvious warning signs. But corruption often survives precisely because it hides behind normal appearances. A person can wear professional clothing, work inside respected institutions, speak politely, maintain a public image, and still make decisions that harm others. The investigation required officials to separate appearance from evidence. Character assumptions could not determine guilt. Only facts could. This meant gathering evidence carefully. Investigators used traditional methods adapted for modern corruption cases. They analyzed communications, reviewed financial records, examined digital activity, interviewed witnesses, followed connections, built timelines. Each piece added another layer. The operation that once existed only as suspicion was becoming a documented network. By late 2019, prosecutors believed they had enough evidence to move forward. But before charges were announced, investigators needed to understand the full scope. How many people participated? How many victims were affected? How much money changed hands? How long had the scheme existed? The answers were disturbing. Authorities eventually announced charges against 27 individuals, including 5 NYPD 911 employees, 1 serving police officer, medical professionals, attorneys, and patient recruiters. The number itself revealed the scale. This was not the action of one person making a single bad decision. It was an alleged network involving multiple professions connected by a shared financial incentive. The investigation had reached the point where secrecy was no longer an advantage for those involved. The invisible trail had become visible. The quiet exchanges had created records. The private conversations had left traces. The money had created a path. And investigators were preparing to follow that path all the way to the people who allegedly built the system. For years, victims had wondered one simple question. How did they know? Now law enforcement was beginning to answer. The answer was not a mysterious leak. Not a random mistake. Not an unavoidable consequence of modern technology. According to prosecutors, the answer was human. People who had access. People who had opportunities. People who chose profit over responsibility. And soon, those choices would be brought into the light. For years, the operation survived because it existed in the space between suspicion and proof. Victims felt something was wrong, but they could not explain it. Investigators noticed patterns, but patterns alone could not put people behind bars. The public heard rumors about aggressive accident lawyers and suspicious phone calls, but rumors were not enough to dismantle a criminal network. A conspiracy built on secrecy depends on one important advantage. Everyone involved believes the truth will remain hidden. The people accused of participating in the 911 data scheme allegedly relied on that belief. They operated inside a system designed to protect information, assuming that the same system would also protect them. But every transaction leaves traces. Every relationship creates connections. Every secret shared between people becomes a potential weakness. And eventually, investigators found the weakness. The breakthrough did not happen because of one dramatic moment. It came from years of careful investigation, from hundreds of small details finally connecting into a single picture. The case began changing when investigators stopped looking at individual incidents and started examining the entire network. The question was no longer, who leaked this one accident report? The question became, who benefits every time accident information appears in the hands of private businesses? That shift changed everything. Instead of following victims forward, investigators began following money backward. Money has a unique quality. People can hide intentions. They can deny conversations. They can claim misunderstandings. But financial records create timelines that are difficult to erase. A payment made after an accident. A transfer between connected individuals. Repeated deposits from people who supposedly had no relationship. Patterns that appeared meaningless at first began revealing a structure. The investigation moved from the streets of New York into offices, bank accounts, phone records, and digital systems. Behind every financial transaction was a question. Why? Why was this person receiving money? Why did these people communicate so frequently? Why did certain payments appear after specific accidents? Why were certain medical clinics receiving patients from the same sources? The answers slowly began revealing what prosecutors described as a coordinated pipeline. Accidents created opportunities. Emergency information created access. Recruiters created clients. Clinics created medical claims. Lawyers created legal cases. Insurance companies provided the money. The system depended on every part working together. Remove the information source, and the machine stopped. Remove the recruiters, and victims were harder to reach. Remove the clinics and attorneys, and the profits disappeared. The alleged conspiracy had many moving parts. That complexity was both its strength and its weakness. The more people involved, the more opportunities existed for mistakes. And mistakes were exactly what investigators were looking for. One of the most important tools in the investigation was surveillance. Not the kind seen in movies, where agents chase suspects through crowded streets. Real investigations are usually much slower. They involve watching, waiting, recording, documenting. Investigators needed to understand relationships before making arrests. They needed to know who spoke with whom, who delivered information, who received money, who made decisions. A single conversation could change the entire direction of the case. Words that seemed harmless in isolation could become powerful evidence when combined with financial records and victim timelines. Investigators also relied on undercover methods. These techniques are often used in corruption cases because criminal networks rarely reveal themselves openly. People involved in illegal activity usually understand that direct evidence is dangerous. They avoid written agreements. They avoid obvious statements. They use informal language. They speak in ways that allow them to deny meaning later. That is why investigators look for repeated behavior. A single suspicious conversation may be explained away. A pattern is much harder to explain. As evidence accumulated, the alleged role of insiders within emergency communications became one of the most important parts of the case. The idea that someone with legitimate access could provide confidential 911 information represented the heart of the investigation. The system was designed around trust. Operators were expected to understand that the information appearing on their screens belonged to the public, not to them. Every name represented a person. Every address represented a home. Every phone number represented someone who had reached out during fear and uncertainty. But according to prosecutors, some employees allegedly saw something different. They saw opportunity. A name became a lead. A phone number became a customer. A traffic accident became a business opportunity. The emotional distance created by computer screens made exploitation easier. The person whose information appeared on the monitor was not standing in front of the operator. They were not crying. They were not explaining what had happened. They were reduced to lines of text. And when human beings become data, some people find it easier to ignore the human story behind the information. The investigators' challenge was proving that this was not accidental. They needed to demonstrate intent. A person accessing information by mistake is one situation. A person repeatedly accessing information and transferring it to people who profit from it is something entirely different. That difference would become central to the prosecution. The breakthrough also came through connecting the various industries involved. At first glance, emergency operators, doctors, lawyers, and recruiters seemed unrelated. They belonged to different professional worlds. But investigators began identifying repeated intersections. The same names appeared in multiple areas. The same accident victims were connected to the same groups. The same financial patterns emerged. Slowly, the separate pieces became one picture. The alleged network was not a collection of independent decisions. It was a system. A system designed around speed. Whoever reached victims first gained control. That created intense competition. In legitimate business, competition is usually about service, reputation, and quality. In this alleged scheme, prosecutors argued, competition was about access. Who knew about the accident before anyone else? Who could contact the victim first? Who could turn a moment of fear into a signed agreement? The victims never knew they were part of that competition. They believed they were simply receiving assistance. That misunderstanding was essential to the alleged operation. A person who knows they are being targeted may resist. A person who believes they are being helped is far more likely to cooperate. This psychological element made the scheme particularly troubling. The alleged criminals were not simply stealing information. They were exploiting vulnerability. The moment after an accident is filled with confusion. People are often in pain. They are worried about medical costs. They do not know what steps to take. A confident voice offering guidance can feel like relief. That trust became the foundation of the alleged business model. By the time federal authorities were ready to act, investigators believed they understood the structure. They had identified participants. They had traced financial relationships. They had documented communications. They had gathered enough evidence to present the case publicly. The operation that had hidden behind ordinary phone calls and routine paperwork was about to become a national example of institutional betrayal. On November 7, 2019, federal prosecutors announced the results of the investigation. The announcement shocked many New Yorkers. 27 people were charged. Among them were 5 NYPD 911 employees, a serving police officer, medical professionals, attorneys, and patient recruiters. The list demonstrated the scale prosecutors believed the operation had reached. It was not one person acting alone. It was a network crossing professional boundaries. The accusations described a world where emergency information was allegedly transformed into a private commodity. Information collected to send help was allegedly used to send sales calls. Data collected to protect citizens was allegedly used to identify potential customers. The announcement created immediate questions. How many victims had been affected? How long had the activity continued? How much money had been generated? Were there more people involved? Those questions would continue long after the initial arrests. But one fact was already clear. The secrecy was over. The people who had spent years operating in the shadows were now facing the full attention of investigators, prosecutors, courts, and the public. The system they allegedly built around hidden information had been exposed by another system. The justice system. For the victims, the revelation created a strange mixture of emotions. Some felt anger. Others felt violated. Many felt disbelief. The emergency call they remembered as a moment of help had become connected to something far darker. The voice that had guided them through fear was supposed to represent safety. Now they wondered whether their private information had been transformed into profit immediately afterward. For law enforcement officials, the case represented a difficult but necessary moment of accountability. The integrity of emergency services depends not on pretending corruption never happens, but on confronting it when it does. The investigation had uncovered an uncomfortable truth. Institutions are not protected by their reputation alone. They are protected by constant oversight, ethical responsibility, and the willingness to investigate those who abuse public trust. The arrests marked the end of the hidden phase of the case. But they were only the beginning of another battle. The courtroom. There, prosecutors would have to prove that the people accused did more than make mistakes. They would have to prove that they knowingly participated in a scheme designed to profit from confidential information. And the defendants would have the opportunity to challenge every allegation. Because in the American justice system, suspicion begins an investigation. Evidence determines the outcome. The breakthrough had finally arrived. The invisible network had been exposed. Now came the question that would decide everything. Would justice be able to prove what investigators believed they had uncovered? The federal announcement on November 7, 2019, marked the end of years of quiet investigation and the beginning of an entirely different battle. The investigation had been conducted largely behind closed doors, where evidence was collected patiently, financial records were analyzed, communications were reviewed, and relationships were mapped one connection at a time. Inside courtrooms, however, every allegation would have to withstand public scrutiny. Every document would be challenged. Every witness would be questioned. Every conclusion reached by investigators would be tested against the highest legal standard. The transition from investigation to prosecution changed the atmosphere surrounding the case. For years, the alleged conspiracy had existed in shadows. Now it stood beneath courtroom lights. Federal prosecutors described what they believed was a coordinated scheme that had transformed confidential emergency information into a commercial product. According to the indictments, individuals from different professions had allegedly worked together to exploit automobile accident victims almost immediately after they contacted emergency services. The charges painted a picture not of isolated misconduct but of an organized enterprise built around access, referrals, and financial incentives. The defendants, however, entered the legal process carrying the same protection guaranteed to every person charged with a crime in the United States. The presumption of innocence. An indictment is not a conviction. It represents allegations supported by evidence that prosecutors believe justify criminal charges, but guilt must ultimately be established in court or through a voluntary guilty plea. That distinction is fundamental to the American justice system. As the proceedings began, prosecutors outlined what they intended to prove. They argued that confidential accident information collected through the New York City emergency response system had repeatedly found its way into the hands of patient recruiters, medical providers, and attorneys through unauthorized disclosures. In return, they alleged, money flowed back through the network in the form of kickbacks and bribes. The government's case depended on demonstrating more than suspicious timing. Receiving an unexpected phone call after an accident was unsettling. Receiving dozens of similar complaints suggested a pattern. But criminal convictions required something far more substantial. Intent. knowledge, participation, financial benefit. The prosecution relied on years of investigative work. Bank records, communication records, electronic evidence, witness testimony, financial transactions, recorded conversations obtained through lawful investigative techniques. Taken individually, some pieces of evidence might have appeared ordinary. Together, prosecutors argued, they revealed a carefully functioning system. The defendants faced a variety of federal charges depending upon their alleged roles. Among the accusations were conspiracy to commit bribery, bribery itself, insurance fraud, wire fraud, mail fraud, money laundering, and the unlawful disclosure of confidential information. Each charge reflected a different aspect of the alleged enterprise. The bribery allegations focused on the exchange of confidential information for financial rewards. The fraud charges addressed the broader scheme involving insurance claims and commercial gain. Money laundering allegations centered on how proceeds allegedly moved through various financial channels. The conspiracy charges recognized that organized criminal activity often depends upon coordinated actions rather than isolated misconduct. Inside the courtroom, legal arguments became highly technical. Defense attorneys challenged the government's interpretation of evidence. They questioned witness credibility. They examined investigative methods. They scrutinized timelines. They argued alternative explanations for financial transactions and professional relationships. Every defendant had the right to contest the allegations vigorously. That adversarial process is not a flaw in the justice system. It is one of its defining strengths. The burden of proof belongs entirely to the government. Defendants are not required to prove innocence. Prosecutors must prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Throughout the proceedings, the emotional dimension of the case remained impossible to ignore. Unlike homicide trials, there were no graphic crime scene photographs presented to grieving families. No forensic discussions involving murder weapons or DNA. Instead, the central issue revolved around trust. Could confidential emergency information collected during moments of crisis be treated as a commodity? The allegations suggested that people reaching out for help had unknowingly entered a marketplace where their private information allegedly carried financial value. That concept resonated deeply with the public. Emergency systems occupy a unique position within society. Citizens reveal intensely personal information without hesitation because they believe doing so will help save lives. The possibility that this trust had been exploited struck many observers as profoundly disturbing. The case also forced difficult conversations inside law enforcement agencies. The overwhelming majority of emergency operators, police officers, firefighters, and paramedics perform extraordinarily demanding work with integrity every day. Many spend careers helping strangers through moments of unimaginable fear. The alleged misconduct of a relatively small number of individuals threatened to cast doubt upon thousands of honest public servants. Department leaders therefore faced two responsibilities simultaneously: supporting the investigation and reassuring the public that the system itself remained worthy of confidence. Internal reviews expanded beyond the criminal prosecution. Officials examined access controls, audit procedures, employee monitoring, training programs, policies governing confidential information. Questions once considered routine suddenly carried far greater importance. Who can access emergency records? How often are access logs reviewed? What safeguards exist to detect unusual activity? How quickly should suspicious behavior trigger investigation? The case became more than a criminal prosecution. It became an institutional examination. Federal prosecutors emphasized that emergency communications exist solely to facilitate public safety. The information collected belongs to the people seeking help, not to those temporarily entrusted with handling it. That principle lay at the heart of the government's argument. If confidential records become commercial products, public confidence inevitably suffers. As the legal process continued, several defendants resolved their cases without full jury trials by entering guilty pleas to various charges. Others continued contesting the allegations through the court system. Each defendant's circumstances differed depending upon the evidence, charges, and legal strategy involved. Federal sentencing in white-collar corruption cases often considers numerous factors. The nature of the offense, the amount of financial loss, acceptance of responsibility, criminal history, cooperation with investigators, the specific role played within the broader conspiracy. Judges evaluate these factors under federal sentencing guidelines while also considering the broader interests of justice. The penalties available for offenses such as bribery, fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy can include substantial prison sentences, financial penalties, supervised release, and restitution where appropriate. For those ultimately convicted or pleading guilty, the consequences extended well beyond incarceration. Professional licenses could be revoked. Careers built over decades ended abruptly. Public reputations collapsed. Future employment opportunities became severely limited. The very professions that had once inspired confidence now became reminders of criminal proceedings. Yet even as individual cases progressed through federal court, prosecutors repeatedly emphasized that the investigation had never been solely about punishment. It was also about protecting the integrity of emergency response. Every emergency operator who performs their duties honestly depends upon public trust. Every police officer arriving at a collision relies on victims answering questions truthfully. Every paramedic needs accurate information to provide proper care. The justice system therefore sought not only to hold individuals accountable where criminal conduct could be proven, but also to reinforce the principle that confidential emergency information is not a commercial asset. It is a public trust. The courtroom became the place where that principle was defended. Not through emotional speeches. Not through dramatic confrontations. But through documents. Evidence. Witnesses. Cross-examination. Legal arguments. The slow, methodical process that defines American criminal justice. For many victims, however, no verdict could entirely erase the feeling of violation. Their personal information had represented something deeply private. They had shared it during one of the most frightening moments of their lives. Learning that investigators believed such information had been exploited for financial gain altered the way many viewed those memories. Justice can punish wrongdoing. It cannot always restore confidence completely. Trust, once damaged, heals slowly. Nevertheless, the prosecution sent a clear message extending far beyond New York City. Emergency communication systems exist because society grants extraordinary responsibility to ordinary people performing extraordinary jobs. That responsibility cannot become a source of private profit. The individuals charged in this case stood accused not merely of violating laws, but of violating one of the most fundamental expectations between citizens and public institutions. When someone dials 911, they should never have to wonder whether asking for help might also make them a customer. The legal proceedings represented society's attempt to answer that concern with accountability. Whether through convictions after trial or guilty pleas acknowledging criminal responsibility, the courts sought to reaffirm a principle more valuable than any insurance settlement or illegal payment. Some information is entrusted to public servants because human lives depend upon that trust. And when that trust is deliberately sold, justice must become the final guardian standing in its place.